Hello, I'm Brittany Aliano, and I'm a patient who's been suffering with gastrointestinal disorders for 9 years. I'm also on the IFFGD Patient Advisory Committee and a healthcare policy lobbyist. Professionally, I'm a Vice President Account Group Supervisor at Ogilvy Health, an advertising agency in New York City. I specialize in pharmaceutical advertising. And today I'm going to give you a peek inside a creative advertising agency. So the goal is to help you all understand some healthcare, marketing, and advertising fundamentals. In bringing a drug to market, there are many cross-functional, interdependent disciplines at work. They're all essential to drive success. Everyone contributes equally, but it's a very integrated team. Today, we're going to focus on healthcare professional and patient promotion. First, we have to define what is marketing. Marketing is the action or business of promoting and selling products or services, including market research and advertising. In pharmaceutical advertising, our objective is to make the audience aware of certain products. We help physicians identify the right patients for the product, and we help patients understand how to take it. Another thing to note is that marketing in the pharmaceutical or healthcare space is highly regulated, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. Some examples of tools that we use in the pharmaceutical advertising and marketing space are we have print materials like visits and brochures that sales reps use to detail physicians. There are digital examples like websites, including search engine optimization, search engine marketing, videos. We have direct mailers, which are all those print materials that you wind up getting in the mail. There are emails, there are other rep materials, samples. Physicians attend medical conferences, and there are booth displays and activities and ways that we engage with them there. There's also social media, support centers, patient education, and more. It's really important as you're building a brand, and we'll get into what that means in a minute, that it aligns with your marketing goals. So first, we start with a drug molecule. So as you just heard in the last presentation, pharmaceutical companies spend years and years taking products through clinical trials, many clinical trials, through lots of different rounds, different phases, in order to bring a drug to approval so it can enter the market. Everything is based in high science, and it's really important that we understand the features of the product in order to market it. After we have the drug, we're then able to create a brand. So a brand is a name, term, design, or symbol, or any other feature that identifies one seller's goods or service as distinct from those of other sellers. So this is an ad of a product I used to work on called Xeljanz, and Xeljanz is the brand. So you can see the logos here on the screen, and Xeljanz appears here as a logo, but it's more than that. It's a brand, and what makes a brand, there's a lot that goes into it. We do entire branding exercises. There are agencies that only specialize in branding and building brands. Sometimes they look at, what do we want this brand to embody? So you actually give this entity human features or adjectives like innovative or really trying to change a market. Like you look for things that a human might embody if that aligns to what your brand's goals are. Everything, as I mentioned, is based in science and data. So we build our scientific story based on what does our drug achieve in clinical trials, like what is the data? What also we need to understand our market and what the other products are doing in the space. So you look at your competitors' data. You need to understand what the unmet needs are. An unmet need is an area that you're trying to fill. So for example, if there are patients that are suffering with a condition and they've tried 2 products and they're not getting a result, then you have an unmet need there. And then you try with your product to fill that unmet need by providing a solution to a problem. So if you think about it in very simplistic terms of problem solution, your unmet need is basically your problem, the problem that you're trying to solve to help patients. We think about what tools do we have to address the unmet needs? What terminology would we use? You think about how you can share your scientific story, who are the stakeholders who we need to connect, where can we have our audiences interact with one another. And we think about nomenclature, which are words or phrases that we use to describe specific things. We sometimes want to use words that our audiences are already using. Sometimes we want to change the lexicon that they're using. So you want to develop materials that help them understand why things have evolved and they should think about things differently. Our visual identity is where we create the creative, and that's your campaign. And that's something that you want to align very closely with what your brand represents. So over the life cycle of a product, there are different communication goals. So you have clinical development, which I know it was covered in the last presentation, and that's where you're looking to maximize your potential. And then as you go into pre-launch initiatives, you're laying the foundation for success. And then you're launching. That means approval. So that's as soon as your drug can enter the market and doctors can prescribe the product. And there you really want to accelerate uptake. But then as a product starts to grow and mature, you think about things differently. And that's where you're trying to maximize peak sales. You're trying to build upon that foundation that you laid in earlier steps. Drugs are usually promoted by pharmaceutical companies when they're on patent. So this graph represents basically the life cycle of a patent, and patents vary in different timeframes in different countries and for different things. But usually we say that they're around like 18 to 20 years, but it really can vary. Also aligned with these timeframes, there's different high-level priorities during each section. So in the development stage, that's where you're trying to understand who your investigators are, what are they looking at. You want to identify the data that you need. You want to understand your audience, so that way you can validate the work that you're doing. In the pre-launch space, this is where you're conditioning the market. You're kind of like setting up the stage in order to prepare for launch later on. Here you might do an unbranded campaign, and we're going to talk about what unbranded and branded campaigns are a little bit later. But you sometimes talk about like your unmet needs. Sometimes you'll talk about all these patients that are suffering of a condition that don't have options available, and how doctors shouldn't overlook them, and how you want to maybe understand a disease state a little bit more. Maybe there's something new and exciting. Maybe there's a new target or a new way to treat something that's being developed or being researched or studied. Sometimes you want to educate physicians for that. So then when your drug comes to market, the doctors understand all the rationale behind it for using it. In launch, this is where, again, your drug gets approved, you're entering the market, you're trying to make sure that physicians and patients are really connected and understanding the value of the drug. You might continue unbranded work in this space as well in order to continue to educate physicians or patients even about what a disease state might entail. In the growth stage, this is where you're looking at optimizing your promotions. You want to leverage brand advocates who are physicians or patients that have had, or caregivers that have had really good experiences with your drug. In the maturity stage, this is towards the end of the life cycle. You're looking at value versus cost. There's a heritage play. A lot of physicians and patients might have a lot of really great experience with your product, so you want to really understand how you can take advantage of that. And then These are examples of unbranded and branded content. So unbranded content is something that's topic-led, produced by, in the pharmaceutical space, by pharmaceutical companies, but there's no explicit mention of a particular brand. So as you can see on the left, there's no mention of any drug. You can see in the lower corner here, it does say that it does have the logo of Pfizer, the brand that, the company, I should say, pharmaceutical company that developed this ad, but both these pieces were created by the same brand. So here it's educating the audience on the target and how they need to think about, something kind of under the surface that they might not necessarily be looking at. And then when iBranch launched, this was one of their initial creatives. So a branded communication is used to inform, enlighten, teach, remind, enrich the knowledge of the audience about a brand to strengthen the values and fundamentals and offerings that the product provides. So again, both of these were created by iBrands, but on the left, it's educating about a disease state or something very specific about a target. In this case, this is a product for breast cancer. So CDK4/6 is a type of receptor found on certain cells. And then iBrands is a brand that launched as a drug for breast cancer. So in building a brand, there's a lot of different things that we think about. The first pillar that we think about is satisfying that unmet need that I talked about earlier. So if there's a problem, how can we solve it? And in pharmaceutical advertising, you really think about how you can differentiate yourself from your competitors. You want to understand, what makes you special, and how does that provide value for your customers. In this target resonance pillar, this is where you're understanding your audience. You want to be relevant with them. You want to resonate with them. You want to use language that your audience understands. In the brand advantage space, this is where we're looking about this is where we're developing our creative, our visual identity. What does our brand represent visually? How does it look? What colors do we use? Things like that. And this is where you're able to communicate your brand's advantage, so it stands out from other competitors' visual identity. So a lot of times in this space, we really look at what are the campaigns that our competition has done, so we know to stay away from that. And even colors, we'll do a whole exercise just mapping out colors of our competitors, so we know to stay away from that. So the first section we're going to dive into a little bit is understanding that unmet need and audience behaviors. Here is, we're going to look at the journey for physicians and patients to really understand what they're going through and how that impacts their beliefs and barriers about a particular treatment. This is an example from a product, or really from a disease state, I should say. This is a drug, this is a product for Parkinson's, and in this space we were looking at the hallucination aspect that some patients experience. So the details on here don't matter so much, but we're going to focus just on these curves here. So different colors represent different audience members. So red is patient, blue is the physician, the caregiver, which might be a spouse or a brother or sister, or an aunt or an uncle or a grandchild. They're represented by gold. And the takeaway here is that there's a lot of emotions that are involved in dealing with a particular disease or disorder, and we want to understand all of that in order to understand our audience. So so these ups and downs, so the lows are where things might be a little rough, but then you have some highs where maybe they're hopeful and maybe they're they finally got a diagnosis, or they are now on a treatment that might be working. Sometimes there's like confusion. So in here, understanding that, okay, patients are, there's a lot of ups and downs in here, twists and turns. We can understand that as a brand. Sometimes there are pain points in here that we can help mitigate. So maybe we provide resources where a physician can or a patient can contact a patient advocacy group to get support. Maybe it's connecting someone with like financial resources to help them pay for their medical expenses. Things like that are things that we look at in order to understand our audience. So some things that we want to understand about physicians, we call them healthcare providers or healthcare professionals or HCPs. So we're going to understand that they don't just have one role, but there's an entire healthcare ecosystem that we really need to keep in mind. Different physicians have different specialties and therefore different marketing dynamics. And there's also the doctor-patient dialogue that we really want to make sure we understand, because sometimes we can provide tools to help a patient speak to a doctor and express the things that they're going through, things that they're feeling, whether it's symptoms or side effects, so that way they can make those 15-minute long doctor's appointments more effective. So first thing we need to understand is that HCPs are gatekeepers. So they are the ones that are going to write the prescription. So they really need to believe that the product is in the best interest for their patients. And we always take a patient-centric approach for the most part when looking at any of our marketing. So the end benefit's always in the patient. We want to make them feel better if our drug can provide that. And in doing so, we need to we want to make sure that the HCP or the physician understands that as well. There is a lot of clinical information that physicians do have to stay abreast on. There's always research, there's conferences, there's new clinical trials reading out. There's a lot of information, so understanding that can help us with our marketing. And again, creativity is critical to success. So again, this is where our visual identity and those campaign elements come into play. So how we market varies by specialties. So doctors have different specialties. For example, there might be primary care physicians. We do profiles on all our different audiences when it's relevant to whatever product we're working on. So again, the details don't matter here, so you don't need to read or understand any of this. But the point is that, like, for primary care physicians, we want to understand a little bit about who they are as people, and what their day looks like, or this looks at generations, but it could vary of what aspect of their life we're trying to understand. But these are just examples of profiles that we developed to understand our audiences, and it looks different for different specialties. So in pulmonology, it might look different. The other thing to keep in mind is that when it comes to interacting with branded content, it varies by specialty as well. And again, the details don't matter, so you don't need to read all this, but in pulmonology, it might look one way, whereas in primary care, it might be different. So if we understand that, we can tailor our messaging and our marketing more effectively. Another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes doctors and patients don't always speak the same language, and companies and brands can develop materials, as I mentioned before, to help patients have better, more effective conversations with their physicians. Some tricks of the trade for HCP marketing is that every specialty has its own tribe. A condition has its own language and insights. HCPs and patients need help finding common ground, and everything we do is always compliant with patient privacy. There are various laws in the EU and in the US and elsewhere in the world that we need to keep in mind, and we always are compliant with that. The last pillar that we're going to talk about is the brand advantage. And so here we're going to get into some of the process that we have at my creative agency and also the team that I work with. So we have this development process that we use, and it has 3 sections. Think, which is where we're trying to understand our audience. Create, that's where we're creating creative and we're trying to create ideas and create visuals that really will have impact. And then realize, that's where we're producing assets, we're distributing it into the market, and we're getting learnings from all of that. How is it doing? And what are the benefits? Where are the shortfalls that we can improve upon, so that way we can do it better next time. So we're going to focus on the think aspect, and I wanted to introduce you to some of my team members. So firstly, we have the account manager, and that's the role that I play. And so as an account person, I liaise between my clients and my internal team. I make sure that expectations are managed, everything is moving along project-wise, things are on time and on budget, and the client's needs are met. And to help make sure that everything we do is aligned to the strategy of the work that we're delivering. We also have a strategic planner. So in the think space, they're really helping to gather those insights and digest those insights so we can help understand our audience better. So here there's a lot of discovery, there's research, there's asking questions. This is where we're defining those pillars that we had talked about earlier. Our medical person, our medical experts, so we have PhDs and MDs on our team that make sure that everything that we're putting forth is scientifically accurate. And then we have our creatives. We have our copywriters, and the copywriters are the ones that write the copy or the words that you see in ads. The art director is the one that makes them pretty and makes them really engaging visually. And so all of us work as a team in order to develop and understand our audience. The analytics piece, they are team members that look at what are our metrics that we'll set up now, so that way we can measure against them later on once we're in the market with our particular campaign. So we make sure we all work together. And then, of course, we have our brand team, who are our clients. So those are the members of the pharmaceutical marketing team. And we all work together to help really understand our audience, ask the questions, develop everything so we can be set up for success. In the next space, this create space, we are looking to write a creative brief. So a creative brief outlines everything that we're trying to accomplish in a particular campaign. It'll outline a phrase that we are trying to make sure that we really embody in our campaign. And it all starts here. And then our creatives, as I mentioned, copywriters and art directors will have a meeting to kick off the project, and then they will go off and they will concept, and they will come up with all these really great, amazing ideas. And in a particular concepting exercise, there are various steps that we go through. So in the initial phase, you might have this sketch that you see here, where it's just very rough, it's a pencil drawing, and then along the way, we will get client buy-in and have rounds of reviews. But then the next phase, we might add some more color. So let's say the clients like this one, they wanted us to push it a little further. We wanted to add some color to really bring it to life a little bit more. And then once we've made it past that round, then we go into this stage here, number 3, which is where we use stock art to create a concept. And stock art are images that already exist, and there are services that provide those. And we work with our creatives, work with our imaging department to help bring those to life. And then once a concept is really agreed upon, everyone's aligned that they want to move forward with something, then we move forward with a photo shoot, or we'll do computer generated imagery, and then it results in number 4 here, this final concept that you see here. And then after that, then we have a concept that everyone's aligned on, and then we develop our materials, our print ads, our CVs, our websites, all those great materials that we talked about earlier. And then the last step, we have realize, and this is where we are, our materials are now in the market. And you see a sales rep here is detailing a physician on a particular product. And then we look at the analytics, as I mentioned earlier. So we set up those measurements for success earlier, and then we measure against them to see how we're doing. And then we can optimize our work for the next campaign. Couple things to note, as I mentioned earlier, marketing is a very regulated industry. Because of this, there are legal, medical, and regulatory reviewers at all pharmaceutical companies, and they are important. They review all pieces and make sure that they are medically accurate. They will be approved by the local governing body, like the FDA in the United States, for example, and that it's everything is like legally sound, especially when it comes to like copyrights and things like that. So the requirements here are very stringent. There are lots of things you can and cannot say. Every country has its own regulatory industry, or in a regulatory agency, I should say, within each company. Pharmaceutical, LMR, team players are in each country, and they review all communications. So all materials that wind up entering the market, or sometimes even internal pieces, they must be reviewed by the LMR teams, and we need to factor that time into our timelines. There are a lot of things that we need to include in our materials, like fair balance, safety information. There's specific prescribing information that needs to be included, references, annotations. We have to get permissions to use art. There's rights, lots of different things. And pre-launch and sometimes post-launch communication materials must be sent to the Office of Prescription Drug Promotion, which is part of the FDA. So this is something that a lot of people don't actually know, that the FDA, not only do they approve prescription drugs, but they also have to review all communication materials. Some notes on patient marketing. So the goal or the philosophy of patient marketing is to help and not to sell. We want to help patients become aware of a new condition or a new drug. We want to help patients experience a good start and understand when drugs are working and when they're getting better. We want to help patients communicate more effectively to their doctor, like we talked about earlier. This is where patients might need help explaining their symptoms, their side effects, so that way their doctor can understand them better. We want to help doctors and patients talk together about whether a drug is appropriate for them. TV commercials. I know, I'm sure all of you have seen pharmaceutical drug TV commercials. TV commercials are used to drive patients to websites to learn more about complex drugs, prepare patients for difficult conversations with their physicians, and self-educate after a doctor has mentioned a drug. TV commercials are not meant to drive patients to ask doctors for drugs for illnesses they do not have. Another really interesting thing that a lot of people may not know is that patient, or what we sometimes call consumer marketing in the pharmaceutical space, is actually not allowed in any countries other than the United States and New Zealand. So this graphic shows you a quick referencing of several countries and whether or not branded promotion materials are allowed in the patient space. As you can see, many of them do not. You can communicate in an unbranded fashion, so there can be disease education about a particular illness, and then unbranded and branded promotion for physicians is allowed in all the countries that you see here on the slide. Lastly, why do I enjoy this work? Well, marketing communications can help be a part of achieving healthy outcome for patients, and that has meant a lot to me, especially because of what I've gone through personally. I really enjoy helping to create solutions to solve problems that help impact patients' lives, and hopefully for the better. And I also get to work on a team with a lot of really great people, and they're all very skilled. They all bring something different to the table, and I enjoy working with them all every day. So thank you.